Okay, stage 3, chapter 7, the conclusions phase. Our quote here at the beginning of the chapter is Sir William S. Gilbert of the HMS Pinafore. Things are seldom what they seem. Skim milk masquerades as cream. Well, it's much like we just talked about, especially the parties to the mediation. They're not going to be as they seem. The conclusions phase, at this stage of the mediation, what we're going to do is discuss what they perceive the real issues of the dispute to be. You know, sometimes referred as the clarification phase. This stage is characterized by the present tense language as opposed to the past tense. Okay, we know what happened in the past. What can we do to come up with for the present and moving forward? Instead of focusing on the party's stated positions, the mediator's task during this stage of the process is to identify and clarify the motivating interest which the parties have raised. And what I've come up with is a kind of an easy list to help identify this. And we're going to do this little exercise later. And when you're coming up with this, you want to identify what their interests are, what each party's interests are in your own mind, because if you don't identify what you think their interests are, then you don't know where they should be heading with this. You also need to identify what they may think the other side's interests are. In addition, you need to identify from what position you think they're coming from, both sides. What position that you think that they're coming from. So we're going to identify their positions, their interests, what the issues really are, and many times, much like Sir William S. Gilbert's quote, things are seldom what they seem. The whole reason they're there isn't the reason they're there. The reason that they're there may be multiple issues that they haven't even brought to the surface yet. Mediation that I did once upon a time was it almost rose to the level of stalking, but didn't quite, because, well, first of all, stalking was one of those things that you have to report. If it's identifiable, that's one of the 3 things you have to report. I'll briefly talk about child abuse. You have to report that. Elderly abuse, you have to report that. And stalking. They added stalking to that list a few years back. It amazes me that spousal abuse is not protected under that somehow. But in this mediation, you had this former boyfriend who'd been living with this young lady, and had been living there for about 3 years, and she got tired of him, and he came in. Now, he was going to school full time, he was working full time, and she was tired of him being gone all the time, and so she found another significant other. But he had come in from work and found all of his stuff packed up in suitcases and boxes sitting outside the apartment door. So anyway, she said she was tired of him, didn't want anything else to do with him, and so he reluctantly takes all of his stuff and finds him another place to live. About a week later, he comes down with a medical condition, a STD, and the doctor, the health services, tells him that here's the only way you could have received that, and he knew that he had not been with anybody else but her. However, she had readily admitted that she had been with other people, especially in the last couple of months. And so he didn't want to embarrass her by just leaving a message on her work phone that says, oh, by the way, you've contracted this STD. And so he would call and leave messages on her work phone and say, please call me, there's something I need to tell you. He would leave notes on her apartment door, say, please call me, there's something I need to let you know. He would leave notes on her car, please call me, there's something I need to let you know. Well, she thought that he just wanted to get back with her. And As it turned out, he just wanted to let her. So what he did was, he had loaned her some money, or actually he had given her some money. And so the only way that he could see that he could do this is he actually requested a mediation. Well, she was glad to participate in the mediation because she was wanting to make sure she got him out of her life. And he used the excuse that she owed him $200, but in fact he had just given her that money. And so they get into the mediation session, and so we're there, and we think it's about a $200 debt that she owed him. And then it turns out, he says, well, the whole reason I'm here is, it's not about the money. It's not, the money was a gift. You can keep that. It's the fact that, you need to go get yourself checked out because you've got this STD. And so, once again, you never know what's going to come out in a mediation session. And clearly in this one, the reason that we were there for the mediation had nothing whatsoever to do with what the style of the mediation was, and what they were actually seeking was this $200. And so that one was an easy one to resolve. That was a quickie. Yeah, I don't know that I'd use that terminology, but yeah. Okay, purpose of clarification, once again, allows the mediator and the parties to uncover the motivating interests behind their positions. The motivating interests behind their positions. Because really, people stand on a position and sometimes they haven't even thought about why they're standing on that position. So ask them. So I understand your position is, and why is your position that? Or why do you believe that? You don't have to use the word position, but just ask them, why do you believe that it's XYZ? Well, I believe it's XYZ because it's always been XYZ. I said, okay, and so why do you think it's XYZ? Or for how far back has it been XYZ? And so just continually ask them short, open-ended questions until you get to the point. There's we kind of have to be, multi-talented to be a mediator. You have to ask questions much like an investigator. You have to have a very open mind. You have to be able to think outside the box. One of the stories I tell in my business communication class is, sometimes people do things and they don't even realize why they're doing it. There's a story that's floated around. I think I even read it in Reader's Digest one time that, the daughter is watching her mom prepare the ham for Thanksgiving, and she sees her mom cut the ham in half, put half of it in the refrigerator, and cooks half the ham for the Thanksgiving dinner. And she says, Mom, why do you do that? Well, because that's the way my mother did it. So being a very inquisitive young lady, she calls the grandmother, and the grandmother says, well, that's the way my mother did it. Well, the great-grandmother's in the nursing home, and so she goes and visits the great-grandmother and says, Great-grandmother, why do you cut the ham in half, put half of it in the refrigerator? Well, she says, well, it's pretty easy. My pot would only hold half the ham. I only had a pot big enough that would hold half the ham. So I would cut it in half. The half would fit in there perfectly. I put the other half in the refrigerator. And so many times we don't think about the purposes or the reasons that people do things. Okay? Have y'all heard that story before somewhere? Well, you have now. Okay. Okay, and I'm pretty sure I read it in Reader's Digest years ago. But there's lots of examples of that. People and companies do things when they don't even really remember why they do them, and they don't really have a justification for why they do things. The second purpose of clarification is to assist the mediator in finding a common denominator which will allow the parties to bargain and negotiate in the next stage of the process. To bargain and negotiate in the next stage of the process. Also, to ensure that all the participants understand exactly what the issues are that they're trying to resolve. The whole reason these folks are here to start with is they can't communicate with each other. And so by letting them talk about what the true issues are, and let's say they haven't brought any true issues out, they've just been kind of skirting around the periphery, ask them what is the main issue? Ask them what is their primary conflict? Because after opening statements, after the conversation's gone back and forth a little bit, you may not know. You may not know what the true issue, what the underlying issue is. And so you have to dig. You have to dig and dig and dig. which will allow the uncovering of any hidden agendas. The additional purposes of clarification is to allow the mediator to restate and summarize the issues, not only for the benefit of the mediator, but specifically for the benefit of the other parties. Okay. Some mediator techniques and points for consideration. Listen carefully to everything that's being said. Pay careful attention to comments, expressions, and mannerisms. And just to give you an idea, we're going to do a little test here. I need a volunteer from the audience. Matter of fact, everybody's going to participate in this, and you two back there need to just don't say anything. These are a couple of former students of mine, so they've seen this little exercise before. And let's see, a volunteer. Byron, thank you for volunteering. Come on up here, please, sir. Okay. Now, everybody write this if you'll come around over here. I think you need to come in closer out there. There you go. Okay. Now, divide your paper into 3 parts. Okay. Now, this is a communication. This is a listening test. Okay. So I want you to do exactly what I'm asking you to do. Okay. Now, in the first block up here, this is a cursive I. I want you to put a dot on the I. Go ahead, and everybody follow along. Put a dot on the I. Okay. Now, in this next block, what I want you to do is to put, let's see, there's a local university around here, TCU. Put TCU in the blank spaces. TCU in the blank spaces. Okay. I picked the wrong volunteer. I should have paid him not to. Okay, anyway. On this last block, this is a little more difficult, and this talks about hidden agendas and that kind of thing. In this last block, the circle represents a 15-foot high electrified fence with 5 feet of concertina wire across the top. Concertina wire is razor wire. So you've got a 15-foot high electrified fence with 5 feet of concertina wire across the top. Inside this, you have 3 animals, but you never ever see one of these animals with the other 2 in the same compound at the same time ever. You would never ever have one of these animals with the other 2 in the same compound at the same time ever. And what these animals are is you have a papa bull, a mama bull, and a baby bull. Circle the one that you would never ever see in the same compound with the other 2 at the same time. Just circle the one. Okay, good. You want to protect the baby bull. Thank you. Let's give Byron a big hand here. Okay. All right. In the first block, my instructions were put a dot on the I. Byron actually listened, so he put a dot up here. You could have actually put it anywhere on here. 99.999% of all my former participants always put it up here. So let's just pretend that you did. And it's because when I say this is a cursive I and I say dot the I or put a dot on the I, they're thinking I'm saying dot the I, not put a dot on the I. And so we make assumptions as mediators when we're listening to people. We assume, we kind of we listen to what they're saying, but we're not hearing. We're not paying attention to what they're saying. The words are coming in, and they're rattling around, and they're going out, but we're making assumptions based upon what we think that they mean, what we think that they're saying. Okay? Same thing here. Byron, you did an outstanding job. Most people will put it on the lines. How many folks put it on the lines? Okay? Most people did. Okay. I'm not volunteering you for anything else. Okay? Well, those aren't the blank spaces. Okay? Once again, we make assumptions, and the blank spaces are just like Byron marked here. Now, I knew I'd get him on this one. Okay? My statement here was we have a compound, and my intent was to direct you away from what was inside the compound. What was inside the compound, that was a hidden agenda. I was putting up a smoke screen, this 15-foot high electrified fence with 5 feet of concertina wire, razor wire around the top of it. I mean, my gosh, why would you need such a secure facility for a couple of animals? Okay, so you really don't even focus on the animals. Well, how many people wanted to protect the baby bull? Raise your hands, just like Byron. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay. How many circled Papa Bull? 2, 3, 5. How many circled Mama Bull? Okay. Everybody else. Why'd you circle Mama Bull?
Well, I was thinking of other bulls wanting to get into the mother bull. You'd want to protect her.
Okay, good answer. Not right.
Well, it's an answer.
It is an answer. Terry?
Because there's no such thing as a female bull.
There is no such thing as a mama bull. Okay? So there's like at least 11 or 12 of you that need other education that, you know, that's a whole nother course that I can steer you to. There's no such thing, steer, get the little pun in there. There's no such thing as a mama bull. Byron, you do know that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So remember, you know, people are going to throw up these smoke screens. People are going to try to steer you, the mediator, down these paths that have nothing whatsoever to do with with what the real issue is. And so you've got to pay attention. You've got to be able to determine what's a smoke screen and what really is in the middle here. Okay? Okay, good. Thank you for participating. Okay. Well, that's a simple listening exercise, and you knew it was a listening exercise. And you did typically the way most people normally respond to this. Now, if I hadn't even mentioned this was a listening exercise, you would have been less attentive to how you responded to these. So you've got to focus on what the people are saying. You've got to pay attention to what they're saying and not make assumptions based upon what you think they mean. Okay? Because typically people say what they mean. So you need to, if they say put a dot on the I, they're not saying put a dot above the I. They're saying put it on the I somewhere. Okay? Okay. You want to try, we're going back to mediator techniques and points for consideration. Try asking open-ended questions. Well, even go beyond try answering. It's so natural for us to ask closed-end questions. You need to focus and constantly practice asking open-ended questions. Because it's easy to ask a yes or no. I mean, those of us that have had children, you know, I mean, where have you been and what time and where do you think you were at? And don't they have phones for you? Yeah, don't interrupt me, you know. You know, they're trying to answer and, okay. Some good questions help me to understand. What are your feelings regarding this? What concerns do you have about this? You know, because sometimes people will talk about an issue and how it bothers them. Have them explain to. And don't say, please explain, because you need to be a little bit more directive. And you can be kind and nice and gentle without saying please, because if you say please, that's almost like saying, giving him an option of answering you or not. So just say, explain to me why. You want to make sure that you balance the questions between the parties so that one doesn't feel ignored. One of the things that I constantly have to worry about with my co-mediators is a term or phraseology called hammering on one side. You know, they're fixated on this one point and they just go after this one person. So almost to the point that the other side and me as the co-mediator think that my co-mediator may be biased towards them for some reason. Okay? So try not to just hammer or to continue asking one side question after question after question. You know, ask a question, let them respond, and then see how the other side feels about that. Get their response. Now that doesn't mean you know, ask this side exactly 16 questions and this side over here 14 questions, and you're going to be considered unbiased if you don't. I mean, it doesn't work that way. But you can certainly get a feel for if you're focusing in on one person more than the other. Give the other side an opportunity to respond or to talk to, okay? And all of this stuff is not, it doesn't come easily. I mean, if they were videotaping my early mediations, everything that I have here in this book, I have violated it not 100 times, probably 20 or 30 times. I violated it enough to know why you don't do it. Why you've got to focus on not doing the things I'm telling you not to do. You're going to do them, don't worry about it, and then you're going to say, Dr. Lacefield said don't do that, and this is why, this is what will happen, you know? It's almost kind of like one of my clients gave me some, you know, free tickets to the National Ballet that was in Dallas for a while, and I thought, how neat, tickets to the National Ballet, you know. So I invited my in-laws and my wife and my kids, and you know, we had like 20 people there and had like 6th row seats, and we all got there. We were all dressed up and we sat down, and then about 2 minutes into it, I said, it's the ballet, you know. So even though the tickets were free, it was still the ballet. No offense to any ballet people out there. Okay. Once again, make sure that your questions are balanced. Be sure that you understand all aspects of the situation before proceeding to alternatives and consequences. Make sure that you understand what the whole one point of that issue is before you try to come up and help generate ideas to try to resolve it. And many times, you have caused the problem as the mediator because you weren't listening to them, you weren't paying close enough attention, and you've probably interrupted them because you've got the cure. You've got what's going to fix their problem. And so you've interrupted them or haven't given them enough time to fully explain their thought or their feelings about an issue. Before jumping to any conclusion, make sure that all the parties have the same understanding of what the issues are to be resolved. And the way that you do that is by restating, clarifying, mirroring, whatever it is that they're talking about. Be patient. You've got to be patient. That's got to be one of your best attributes. And if it's not, then you've got to work on it. Because if you're not a patient person, now patience is also relative. I mean, the whole reason I don't teach at lower than college levels because, you know, I just have no patience for kids. And you know, after you slap 2 or 3 of them around, you know, I'd be unemployed or in jail or something. So that's why I teach adult students, because then you can just, you know, you can just throw them out of your class. You know, that happens. But I've never had to do that ever in 15 years of teaching. I've had some of them want to throw me out, but be patient. You have to have patience. Now, you don't have to have the patience of Job. You just have to be patient. You know, have enough patience to let people get their thoughts across. Allow issues other than the original stated problem to be discussed, because that may be the true issue. That may be the true problem. Okay, so many times I've seen co-mediators, you know, they'll say, well, let's don't discuss that because that's not what we're here to talk about today. Well, how do they know that's not what we're here to talk about? Just because it's not in the information they sent us, or if it's not part of what's being mandated by the court as part of the original problem, that doesn't mean that's not a problem that we need to address. Because if we don't address that problem, that may prevent us from resolving the other issues. Restate and summarize as many times as necessary. Make sure that you don't back people into a corner, make them feel defensive, and always give them an opportunity to save face. You don't want to put them in a position where they're going to lose face. Okay? Bless you. Clarifying mediatable issues. Well, the mediator tries to find the common denominator which will allow the parties to bargain and negotiate in the solution stage of the process. To assist in clarifying these issues, you may wish to use a problem-solving approach. First, you know, be attentive and alert during the initial opening statements and emotional ventilation stage. Make notes of issues that are repeated by the parties. Okay? Make notes of the issues that are repeated by the parties because they have a commonality there. There is something that either they both agree about or they both disagree about. You know, and it's always good to ask, what is it that you have agreed upon in the past? Okay? For example, if they say we never agree on anything, well, some of the other things you can focus on is, if we're talking about a family situation, well, how did you decide to buy that house? Okay? How did you decide to furnish that house? You know, how did you decide to pick that neighborhood to live in? Okay? All of these things, you know, these are all decisions that typically most people make jointly. Okay? So there's lots and lots and lots of decisions that are made that we don't think that we're making them jointly, but we do, just as a normal course of life. Okay? Why do you drive the car that you drive? Why did you select that car? Why did you select the family vacation? How did you decide to go on that trip? You know, there's unending things that you can use to show that they've agreed on things in the past. Summarize the issues and check for accuracies and completeness of the issue list. And the way to do that is very simple. Well, the issues, as you have presented them to me, are, and you spell them out. And if you're wrong, they'll tell you. And don't worry about being wrong. You know, they will tell you. Because you may have heard it one way. Prime example is divorce mediation that I was doing, and I did this little exercise. I repeated the issues back, and everybody in the room heard something a certain way except for me. I was the only one that heard it, and I had written it down what I thought was verbatim, because I had it in my notes. But you know what? I had heard it differently than my co-mediator heard it, and then the other parties heard it. So, restate them. Now, when you're talking about issues, it's okay to say, is there anything else? Or say, what other issues are there that we haven't discussed? What other issues are there that we haven't discussed? That's probably a better way to say that. Now, keep that little tidbit in mind, because when we go to closing, when we actually reach an agreement, once you have the agreement in writing, don't ever end by saying, is there anything else? Don't ever, ever do that. Because if you say, as the mediators, is there anything else, then the parties are going to think, oh my gosh, the mediator thinks there's something we're forgetting. So don't ever say at the agreement writing stage, is there anything else? Just say, is this your agreement? Is this your agreement? Okay? And I'll remind you about that later. Do not summarize such as, well, the problem is Johnny watches too much TV. You want to turn that around and say, Johnny's TV watching is a problem for his mother. Or is the problem Johnny watching too much TV? Or what is the problem with Johnny watching too much TV? You want to make sure that when you're summarizing, you're not making a statement of fact, and that you're not wording the sentences such that you're putting your own opinions out there. Okay? And you want to try to use the same words that the parties have been using. Okay? You don't want to try to throw some fancy 5-syllable word out there if that's not the terminology they've been using. Okay? You want to prioritize. You want to let the parties decide which issues they want to work on first. Ask them which of the issues might be easiest to start with. Well, and that's not kind of the way you ask it. What you want to say is, you don't want to say, well, what's most important to y'all? What's most important to you? Well, and it's going to be rare that it's going to be the same thing that's going to be most important. So automatically you violated the prime directive, and now you've created a conflict. So you might say, well, you as the mediator might pick a couple of issues and say, would you like to talk about the issues regarding the children? Would you like to talk about the issues regarding the hours of employment? You want to talk about, you pick an issue. And if they don't want to talk about that issue, one of them will pipe up and say, but once again, remember, you're controlling this, and most of them don't ever want to disagree with the mediator. You can always ask, what issues are you close to agreement on? What issues are you close to agreement on? And that'll always get them talking, because they're probably not close on anything. But one of them will say, well, I think we're close on whatever that issue is. And the other one will say, well, we're not that close. And then I'll say, well, let's talk about that issue. And why do you think that we're close on this? And turn to the other person after they've responded and say, why do you think that we're so far away on that issue? And I like to use the term we a lot, you know, because that makes me almost part of it. I'm not being accusatory by saying, what is it that you want to talk about? What is it that, oh, so this is your problem? So we want to prioritize. Defining non-mediatable issues. There are certain issues that are difficult, if not impossible, to mediate. The mediator should acknowledge these issues as real and important. Don't generalize. You need to realize that feelings are important, that judgments and opinions are not subject to agreement. Now, you can help somebody change their opinion by asking questions, by helping them see a different perspective. Also, other things that are difficult to mediate, which you really can't mediate, are drug abuse, spousal abuse, child abuse, elderly abuse, and somebody who's not present at the mediation.